We're going to go ahead and get started, and the webinar today is on keeping children physically safe. Hopefully everyone can see my screen, and we've got a little slide presentation right there that will follow along. If you don't, you can't see it, it's okay. You can just listen to the information that we're going to be going over today. So, got a lot of information to cover in a very short hour, so we're just going to jump right on in there and get to it. Keeping our children physically safe is one of the most important things that we do in an early childhood classroom. There's a big difference between keeping children physically safe and keeping children mentally safe. But I think it's important to address that both need to have your highest priority. And the reason why I say that children must be kept mentally safe is because if the child does not feel safe in their brain, in their mind, then they're not safe in the classroom. And we know, and we've talked in previous trainings quite a bit, that that a child must feel safe before they can behave. A child must feel safe before they can learn. So making sure that that child feels safe in the classroom is really important. And remember, the child must feel safe from their point of view, not your point of view. So one of the most important things that we can do in the classroom is to see the world from the child's point of view. Especially when it does come to safety. I always encourage teachers at least once or twice a year, and new teachers especially, to get down on your hands and knees and crawl around your classroom, crawl around the playground on your hands and knees. The reason why I encourage you to do this is that you see the world from their point of view, from their eyes. Being 6 foot tall, looking around the classroom is going to be very different than looking around the classroom when you're, 2.5, 3 feet tall. I need to do something real quick. For some reason, the microphones are not muted. There we go. Okay, awesome. All right, and so we want to be able to see the classroom from their point of view. Now, here's my objectives. I've got 5 objectives that I want to talk about today during our webinar. We're going to talk, of course, about keeping children physically safe. We're going to talk about teaching children about safety. They've got to be able to understand it. They've got to be able to have those skills. Modeling safe practices, responding to injuries and emergencies, and engaging families in safe practices. So those are the 5 things that we want to talk about today. All right, so first off, keeping children physically safe. This list could go on and go on and go on, and with whether it be with licensing, whether it be with the Council for Professional Development, there's a lot of safety checklists that are out there that can help your program and help you maintain a safe environment. If you need a sample safety checklist, you can always email me. I've got several variations of safety checklists that I don't mind sharing with you, and then you can adapt it to your particular center or classroom. But I do like to have those checklists that you can just kind of go down and make sure that you're maintaining that safe environment. One of the biggest mistakes that we make in the classroom, and as a consultant, I have consulted on many licensing issues where centers were placed on probation with child care licensing, or they were about to have their license revoked because of safety issues. The common thing that we see in almost every one of these situations is that people get comfortable, they get complacent. You start looking at safety with blind eyes. In other words, when you're doing your safety checklist, you start thinking about what you remember, not what you actually see. And I could tell you all lots of crazy stories about times when children were placed at risk or seriously injured, and it was because the safety checklist wasn't followed. Whoever was doing it just was doing it off of memory instead of what they actually saw. So you've got to have that fresh set of eyes all the time when it comes to maintaining that safe environment. What I have on the screen right here are just 5 the most important things that we can squeeze into this hour webinar. Of course, first, follow your child-staff ratios. Now, the state of Texas, most of us here on the webinar today are in the state of Texas. Y'all know that our ratios are pretty high, especially compared to other states. If you are in a program that can run lower child-staff ratios, obviously that's going to be better. But this is a very heated argument, very heated debate right here. Do lower child-staff ratios really create a safer environment? And you could get into a big debate over that. One of my favorite quotes when it comes to child-staff ratios, and especially with safety, is that, a horrible teacher with 11 kids is going to be a horrible teacher with 7 kids. So lower ratios doesn't always guarantee a safe environment. It definitely helps. Don't get me wrong. If you can have a lower ratio, it definitely helps, but it's not the immediate fix. What I will say about, following caregiver ratios is that even though it is not a state requirement to have 2 caregivers in every classroom or 2 teachers in every classroom, I strongly encourage programs to try to have at least 2 adults in every classroom. 2 sets of adult eyes are definitely going to be better than 1. And when we interview a lot of teachers, and again, especially consulting on incidents that have happened where children were placed at risk, one of the biggest things that happens with safety is that teachers get distracted. And while they are distracted is when a child gets hurt, or when a child, breaks something and creates a risk. We could make a whole list on what is distracting teachers that is placing children at risk, and it could be everything from disruptive behaviors in the classroom, a child that's acting out, so a teacher's having to deal with that child, then kind of ignoring the rest of the group. It could be an ill child, a child that is sick, a child that's just needing some extra attention and searching for that attachment figure, and that takes your attention away from the rest of the group. Parents that want to come in and talk to us, the list goes on and on. So again, having 2 adults in the classroom is really going to help in those situations, if possible. Now I know a lot of y'all are in a situation where it's a single teacher environment, 1 adult for the group of kids. Financially, that might just be the only way it can happen. I get that. You're going to have to, put extra procedures in place to maintain that safe environment if you're the only one in the classroom. The Consumer Product Safety Commission is a federal organization that maintains safety for not only toys and equipment, but basically anything that you can purchase that is out there. And y'all know that we are responsible, or we are required by child care licensing to be up to date on recalls and unsafe items in the classroom. So if you don't already do this, you can go to a website, and I will type it into the chat section over here. It's cpsc.gov, Consumer Product Safety Commission, right there. You can go to that website and you can sign up for emails that anytime there is a recall for a recalled toy or unsafe item, you're going to get that in an email. Now, when you sign up for this email, you can filter it to where you only get emails about children's products. I strongly encourage you to do that. Otherwise, you're going to get emails on everything from airplane parts to lawn mowers to tractors, you know. So you just want children's items. And then once you do get a recall, it is your responsibility to go through your classroom, go through your center, and make sure that you don't have any of these items that are unsafe or recalled. The other big thing with protecting children from unsafe toys and equipment is always making sure that toys and equipment in your classroom are age appropriate for that group of children. If something was to happen to a child and a child was injured in your classroom, and it was found that the equipment was not age appropriate, you know, you might as well just hand the parent a blank check and say fill in the dollar amount, because you're in a lot of trouble at that point. I don't encourage centers to allow parent donations. Sometimes parents want to clean out their child's bedroom and bring you toys or items to donate to the school. While that's a very nice gesture, I don't recommend doing that, because you don't have the original packaging. You don't know what the manufacturer's recommendations are, what age group it's for, those type of things. And sometimes they bring in broke items, unsafe items, or even recalled items, and we definitely don't want those in the classroom. If you do have a toy or piece of furniture that is broken in the classroom, it needs to be removed immediately, all right? From the moment you notice that it's unsafe or it's broke, it needs to be taken out of the classroom. Again, so many times that situations have happened where children have been injured on broken toys or broken equipment. The teacher, the director knew it was broke. They were just waiting on someone else to take it out of the room. Needs to come out of there immediately. I like to get the children involved when it comes to making sure that the toys and the equipment stay safe and in good repair. Talk to your children about what is safe, what is not safe, what could happen when a toy is broken, and get them involved. And it's really fantastic when a 2-year-old can come up and tell you, you know, hey teacher, this toy is broken. And especially if they can say this toy is unsafe. That is fantastic, and that's kind of the goal that we're going for right here. Choking hazards is another big part of keeping children physically safe. And a lot of people just really don't understand the number of choking hazards that could potentially be taken into your classroom that you need to avoid. Again, this is where paying close attention to the packaging that these items come in, and if it says anything about choking hazard, it should not be in your classroom. Of course, y'all know that the golden rule is that a toilet paper tube, anything that can fit through a toilet paper tube is a choking hazard. So those of you that are in a toddler 2-year-old classroom, it's a good idea to get those toilet paper tubes and go through there, and if something goes through it, it needs to come out of the classroom. Other things that a lot of people don't think about that could be choking or that are choking hazards, excuse me, balloons are a big choking hazard. Cotton balls, all right, is a choking hazard. Any classroom, children 3 and under, you should avoid having cotton balls in those classrooms. So they do need to be in the first aid kit, but not on the classroom level. Also foods, and we'll talk about food a little bit later on too, but making sure that we're serving foods that are not choking hazards for the children, such as grapes, for example. If you're dealing with a young child, especially a child that has problems chewing and swallowing, you want to make sure you cut those grapes up or just not serve them. Of course, we know that over the last 5 years, there has been a very large initiative on a federal level on sleep safety guidelines. And we here in Texas have seen 3 updates to the minimum standards over the last 5 years when it comes to sleep safety guidelines and keeping children safe. And again, all of these are federal mandates, so it's not something that the state of Texas is making up, but it's coming straight from Washington. Those of you that are infant, toddler caregivers that are on the webinar, you know that in your crib, nothing goes in the crib except for the baby. Must have tight-fitted sheets, and the way licensing is going to measure if it is a tight-fitted sheet, if they can pinch it and pull it up and it pulls up higher than a quarter, then they're going to say that it is not safe and not tight enough. So that's kind of the little golden rule right there. Y'all know now also no swaddling children at any time and on any surface. And of course, children cannot sleep in a restrictive device. As of April of 2017, that is a new minimum standard. So bouncy seats, swings, car seats, high chairs, those devices, children cannot sleep in them. If they fall asleep in a restrictive device, they need to be put straight into the crib. All right, for your older children, never allow them to cover their head with their blanket. Even if the child covers it themselves, you need to remove that blanket off of their head. Make sure that you've got enough room in between your sleeping mats for caregivers to walk and work in between the mats. All right. And last thing, monitoring your program for safety. This kind of goes right back to that safety checklist I referred to earlier, maintaining a safe environment. It is everybody in the center's responsibility to maintain a safe environment, not only for the children, but for the employees, for the parents, for any visitor coming into your program. We want to make sure that it's safe. If there are any directors that are on the webinar today, make sure that this is in your employee and parent handbook. That there are responsibilities for maintaining a safe environment, such as no running through the building, making other people aware of mop floors. We don't want people to slip and fall. Making sure that all of your rugs are skid-proof rugs, that they're not going to curl up on the ends and create a tripping hazard. They need to be rugs that are manufactured for this type of environment. When we talk about keeping children physically safe and rugs, I never, ever, ever encourage programs to purchase rugs at, Walmart or Target or any of those retail establishments. Don't buy rugs from them. Those rugs that they are selling is made for a home. It is not made for commercial use, and it's definitely not made for a classroom. Make sure you get your rugs from a company, Discount School Supply, Kaplan, Lakeshore, Childcraft, whoever you order your stuff from. Those rugs are going to be made for this environment, and they're going to be a lot safer for the children and the adults that are around them. All right, let's talk now about teaching children about safety. All right, now I already said it at the beginning of the webinar today, but children must feel safe in the classroom. Children must feel safe before they can behave. They must feel safe before they can learn. If you do have a child that is misbehaving or being aggressive, one of the very first things I would look at in that situation is, does that child feel safe from their point of view? And remember, because you got to see the world from their eyes. So all day long, throughout the day, you need to be telling your children, my job is to keep you safe. And train your children that anytime you say, my job is to keep you safe, the children respond and they say, my job is to help you keep us safe. And y'all need to be saying that all day long, 10 to 15 times a day that you say it. That way, again, it's going to create that sense of safety in the classroom. The other thing with your interactions and as you're interacting with the children, especially if you're having to coach the children or guide the children, you know, always try to include that word safe somewhere in the sentence. You know, I need you to walk in the classroom so that you will be safe. All right. You know, I need you to keep your hands to yourself so that you are safe. Anytime you can throw that word safe into your interactions, it's going to be better for the child. We talk about create and reinforce safety rules. Couple of little things I want to talk about right here. And I really don't even like to call them rules. I like to call them expectations rather than rules. Remember that you always must tell children what they can do, not what they can't do. So as you're creating and reinforcing these safety rules or expectations, you want to tell them what they can do. So instead of saying, you know, no running in the classroom, you need to say, we walk in the classroom so that we are safe. You know, so remember, we've talked about this in previous trainings too. The brain, especially for young children, as the connections are being formed, the brain does not understand the word don't. All right? So that's why with younger children, when you say, you know, don't touch that cup, what's the first thing they do? They reach over and they touch the cup. And you're like, I just told you, don't touch that cup. And then the kid is all confused because they don't know why they're in trouble. And that's because the brain doesn't understand that don't. All right? So again, you tell them what they can do. All right? The other thing I want to remind y'all about safety rules or expectations, one rule per age group is what the child is able to understand. So if you're working in a 3-year-old classroom, you should have 3 safety rules or expectations. If you do more than 3, they're not going to be able to remember them. They're not going to be able to follow them or understand them. 2-year-old classroom, 2 safety rules, all right? So kind of the golden rule right there is 1 rule per age of the child. So you want to keep it to a pretty short list. And your safety expectations should be something that is discussed with the children daily, all right? Sometimes I'll go into a classroom in January or February to help with classroom management, and I'll ask the teacher, you know, well, did you go over the safety rules with the children? Yes, we talked about that back in August. Well, it's February now, you know, they're not going to remember what you talked about back in August. These safety expectations have to be talked about daily. And again, when you're interacting, you're going to constantly use that word safe, and this is going to teach them about safety. And the goal here, once again, is for the children to self-regulate and for the children to be aware of safety practices. We want them to tell you when things are not safe in the classroom. When you start having children, 2, 3, 4-year-olds that are telling you that, you know, this interaction was not safe or this toy is not safe, you've done a good job then, because we want them to be aware of safety. And also, we're going to talk about engaging parents here in just a little bit too. We want them to do the same thing at home. You know, I had the funniest conversation with a dad just a couple of weeks ago. He came to the front desk to pick up his child, and he said, you know, we were at home over the weekend, and Dad was doing something. I don't remember what it was. And he said his child, his like 3 or 4-year-old child, told him, "Dad, that's not safe." So he's like, I got corrected by my own little kid. I thought that was pretty funny because obviously the teacher in that classroom has been talking a lot about safety. I thought that was great. Um, Practice your emergency preparedness plans. And we talked about this a lot last year when I was doing my weekend mini conferences. And one of the new minimum standards that was put into place in September of 2016 is that you must have a lockdown plan, and you must practice your lockdown plan at least 4 times a year. So if you have an intruder that comes into your program and wants to cause harm, you're going to be able to hide your children and try to keep everybody safe. Well, as we were discussing this last fall, in almost every city I went to, I got the question of, well, practicing this lockdown drill, isn't that going to scare the children? Well, it's probably going to scare them just as much as the fire drill or the severe weather drill and everything else that you do. It really does come down to your composure and how well you maintain yourself in these situations, because the children are going to follow your lead, all right? And if you remain calm, then it's definitely going to help the children remain calm. Also, the more you practice your emergency preparedness plans, the less likely they're going to be scared whenever you do them. Now, of course, the ultimate goal is to never have to actually do a lockdown or severe weather or fire. That's always the goal, but unfortunately, it does happen. I don't know if y'all saw in the news just a couple of weeks ago, there was a center, and I believe it was in San Antonio, a child care center that caught fire in the middle of the day with children inside, and they were able to safely evacuate all of the children and the adults from the building. But don't ever get that it's not going to happen to me mentality, because things could happen, all right? Same thing with the severe weather. I've actually experienced myself, the tornadoes, and had to do the whole duck and cover, pretty scary day. But practice, practice, practice. All right. Modeling safe practices. This is, probably one of the biggest things that we can do right here, is that you are the role model for the child, and they are constantly watching you and listening to you, and you're their biggest role model. So we need to model safe practices within the program. I like to use what is called the MAP technique. Any of y'all that are familiar with conscious discipline, familiar with Dr. Becky Bailey and her research and her teachings, she's the one that came up with the MAP technique. We use this quite often in my centers, but it's really good. And MAP is model, add visuals, practice. So anything that you expect the children to do in your classroom, you're going to model it, you're going to add visuals, you're going to practice it. So I want y'all to create routine books, all right? Especially when it comes to safety. And, whether it's walking in the classroom, walking in from outside, the appropriate way to play on the playground equipment, hand washing, the appropriate way to wash our hands. Take pictures of the children doing what they're supposed to be doing, and make a little book out of it, okay? Put it on some construction paper, cardstock, laminate it, get some spiral rings, and you're going to make a lot of these routine books and put them in the classroom as visual reminders of what we need to do to be safe, all right? What I love about visuals, pictures that you can put in the classroom, modeling safe practices, visuals never get tired of telling children what to do. All right. You know, you hear this with adults all the time. I'm so sick and tired of telling this kid over and over again to walk or to wash their hands or whatever it is that they're struggling with. That's the great thing about visuals. They never get tired of reminding. So have those throughout the classroom. And if you haven't tried it yet, making the routine books or the safety books, you can call it whatever you want, real life pictures of the children currently in your classroom following safe practices. They're really magical. The kids love them. They love looking at them. And it really does help create a safe environment. Now, I said pictures of the children you currently have in the classroom. You always want to make sure that you're using these pictures so the children can see themselves. They can see the other children in the classroom that they're familiar with. That's really going to help with the modeling of safe practices. So every single year, when you get your new group of children, you're going to be making new routine books or updating your routine books and all of your visuals in your classroom. That's really important. Also, with the map technique and adding visuals, the younger the child, the bigger the picture, all right? So infants, if you're doing anything visual in an infant room with real life pictures, those need to be at least printed on 8x10 paper or whatever, because for an infant, their eyes are not fully developed. They can only see approximately 12 inches in front of them, see clear about 12 inches in front of them, so that picture's got to be really big for them to recognize it. Even in your toddler 2-year-old classrooms, any photograph that you post or visual that you post, at least a 5x7, so that the child can see it and focus on it. And again, the older the kids, the smaller the picture. All right. Practice daily on teaching safety and problem-solving skills, and throw scenarios out to your children. If this situation was to come up that is not safe, you know, how are we going to handle it, or how are you going to handle it? And constantly coach the children on these problem-solving skills so that when an actual situation comes up, they're going to be better equipped with the skills to keep themselves safe. So again, that's something that's part of your everyday routine. The other thing about modeling safe practices is that it's very important that, number one, I want y'all to change a term or definition in your head. You know, whether you call yourself a teacher, you call yourself a caregiver, you know, I prefer teacher, caregiver, whatever role that is, you know, I kind of want you to erase that out of your brain, and I want y'all to start seeing yourselves as an attachment figure, all right? An attachment figure, because that's how the children look to us. You know how everyone has a person that when they're stressed, when they're anxious, when they're confused, when they're hurt, they go to their person for safety and security. Well, that's how the children see us, is we are their person. That's called an attachment figure. When a child is injured or when a child is in distress, the amount of time that it takes for their attachment figure to tend to that child is very, very important for brain development and very important for their sense of safety. If a child is injured or in distress and their attachment figure does not respond to them quick enough, or if they don't respond to them in a positive way, it could create what's called anxious attachment. and that is a blueprint that will stick in the brain for pretty much the rest of their life. That anxious attachment situation, where then whenever a child does not feel safe, they really don't know if the adult or the caregiver or the teacher or the attachment figure, they really don't know if they're going to respond or not. Because sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, sometimes they're positive and loving, sometimes they're negative, and it creates a lot of insecurities with the child. So respond to injuries and emergencies with attunement, and respond with compassion, and most importantly, you know, when you go to a child that has been injured, one of the first things you say is, I'm here to keep you safe, or I'm here to make you safe, all right? And then, of course, you'll fix the boo-boo, handle the emergency, whatever it may be. But they've got to have that sense of safety first, all right? So that response time is pretty important. Now, we could circle this right back to our conversation we had in the beginning about child staff ratios and group sizes. If you are by yourself with 18 children and a child gets injured, you need to respond to that injury while also maintaining the other 17 kids in the room. That becomes a challenge. And we all agree with that right there. So that just kind of goes back and supports my recommendation of 2 adults in the classroom if possible, so that you can have one person that can be that attachment figure, that can respond to the child and create that secure attachment while the other person maintains the rest of the group. Okay. And then last objective that I wanted to talk about is engaging your families in safe practices. You know, the work that we do in early education is definitely extremely important. The work that we do in early education creates a blueprint that will stay with the child for the rest of their life. We get to kind of create the structure, all right, on who that child will become. So everything that we do is so incredibly important. However, it also takes great relationships with your families, and it takes cooperation with your families. And what I always like to say, and the words that I like to use when I'm talking to a parent or a guardian, is that we are so excited to partner with you on your child's early education experience. And I like to use that word partnership to kind of bring us together. We really want to encourage our families to follow the same or similar safe practices at home than that we do in the school, so that that child can have consistency. And consistency is going to help build those connections that are needed. So sharing a lot of your safe practices with your families, you know, and encouraging them to make routine and safety booklets for home with pictures, just like you have in the classroom, is a fantastic idea. I know of a school down in the Houston area that actually had a family night where they invited all the families with the kids to come into the program at nighttime, and they did a little workshop on how to create safety booklets and routine booklets, and they actually made them during this little parent workshop for the parents to take home, and I thought that was so fantastic and so smart. But it's just going to reinforce everything that we're doing in the classroom with consistency at the home. Now, I do have up here on the screen that you do need to have a parent code of conduct in place. I always recommend that in every parent handbook you have a parent code of conduct. If you don't currently have a parent code of conduct, you need to add it, please. Strong recommendation right there. Even though they are the parents of the children and they are our customers and they pay us for their child to be here, they do need to behave when they're in our building and when they are around other children. And you've got to outline that. Let them know what behavior is acceptable, what behavior is not acceptable. You know, for example, on my parent code of conduct that I have, I actually address a parent that is dissatisfied with anything, you know, that happens in the school or happens with their child, must be addressed with the center director in the front office, and not in the classroom. And I specifically outline parents must maintain their composure while in the classroom, and any concerns, you know, need to be taken to the front. We don't want the other children in the classrooms to witness a parent becoming aggressive or a parent upset or a parent stressing out. Whenever the children witness this, they're not going to feel safe, all right? And you might even want to use those words. You know, Mrs. Smith, I understand that, you know, you're not happy with the situation right now. However, your tone of voice is not making my children feel safe. All right, can we please take this to the front office, or we need to take this to the front office. So the way the parent interacts with the teacher, the way the parent interacts with other parents, definitely parents interacting with other children, all needs to be outlined in your parent code of conduct so that you can maintain a safe environment. And you know how I told you, when you're interacting with children, you want to always use the word safe or safety as much as possible in your interactions. You're going to do the same thing with your families. All right, when you're having conversations with mom and dad or grandma, grandpa, or guardian, you know, this is something that we did in the classroom today so that your child will be safe. You know, another great example of family engagement and instilling that safety in them, I'm sure that all of y'all have had the situation where the parent drops off the kid in the morning, the child is screaming and crying. You've probably said it before. You know, I promise you, by the time you get to your car, the child stops crying. You know, we've all been there. Try to rephrase that in a different way. So when that parent drops off that child and they're screaming and crying, tell that parent, I'm going to keep your child safe today. All right? Just kind of a better way of explaining that. It's really going to make them feel comfortable too. All right? Like I said, encourage families to follow the same safety rules at home that you're doing in your program. And what I really like to do, and it's kind of like the story I told you earlier with the dad, talk to your children daily about what they can do at home to stay safe, and how they can assess their home, their bedroom, their toys to make sure everything is safe when they're not in your environment. So kind of giving that accountability back to the kids. And it's fantastic when a child can tell a parent that's not safe. And that's really the goal that we're going for right here. And if a parent gets upset or offended by this, it's kind of their problem, all right? Because we want that child to be safe both at our program and at home, all right? So any questions or comments over anything that we went over? If y'all got a question or comment, type it into the chat screen over there on your control panel, and we can talk about that. One thing I forgot to mention, of course, is lead paint. You want to constantly check your program, make sure that there's no lead paint. If you find anything that's painted with lead, you've got to immediately remove that. If you're unsure, have someone come in and check it out, or replace it, those type of things. Playground equipment, maintaining a safe environment definitely includes monitoring your playground. making sure that your playground equipment is in good repair, and making sure that the children know how to properly use the playground equipment. Most accidents on the playground happen when children are unaware of how to use something. And making sure that your playground equipment is age appropriate for the age group that you're taking out there. We talked about our routine and ritual books, our safety books. Definitely you want to have a safety book on the playground and ways to stay safe while on the playground, and lots of pictures of children playing safely on the playground that you can put in that book. And I like, even when you go outside, that you take your playground safety book outside with you. Maybe if you have a basket or something you carry with you. That way it's available for the children to review or to look at while they're on the playground. But if you do have a child that their behavior on the playground is not safe, or their interactions on the playground is not safe, then you can pull them over and have them look through the book and point out what is safe, what is not safe, and remember telling them what they can do instead of what they can't do. So you always want to address it that way. But that works out really well out on the playground. It's a little difficult to add visuals on the playground, even if you contact paper it, because with weather, it's eventually going to come off. It's going to start looking nasty. So visuals that you can take outside with you is going to be the best alternative right there. All right. I hope you all enjoyed the webinar. I hope that you learned something that you can take back to your classroom and keep the children safe. You will be getting a certificate of completion that will be emailed to you approximately 1 hour after this webinar. And you're going to want to make sure that you print the entire email and attach it to the certificate. That's very important. And the certificate will be emailed to the email address that you used when you registered. So there you go. Well, thank you everybody for joining me today, and I will hopefully see you on a future webinar. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.